The Grand Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished stone and metal, its ceiling lost somewhere in the artificial atmosphere above. David Reed walked alone across the empty floor, his footsteps echoing against walls that had witnessed 1,000 verdicts. 12 species sat in judgment today, arranged in a perfect circle around the center where he would stand. Their forms varied from the crystalline harmonious to the gas cloud whispers, but their eyes all held the same expression. They had already decided. The walk took 5 minutes. David used every second to memorize their faces, their postures, the way some refused to meet his gaze while others stared with open contempt. Ambassador Kill of the Harmonious Collective rose from his seat, light refracting through his translucent body in patterns that signified formal proceeding. The universal translator hummed to life. Human Representative David Reed, you stand before the Galactic Council to receive judgment on behalf of your species. Do you understand the gravity of this moment? David stopped at the center mark. I understand you've made your decision before I entered this room. Silence rippled through the assembly. Kill's light patterns flickered with something that might have been surprise or anger. We have reviewed 5,000 years of human history. The evidence speaks clearly. Then let's hear it. David kept his voice steady. 20 years of diplomatic training held him together even as his hands wanted to shake. The screens activated around the chamber. Images of human warfare filled the space. Ancient battles with swords and spears, modern conflicts with nuclear fire, the environmental scars left on Earth. The Whisper's representative spoke next, their voice like wind through empty corridors. Your species has spent 90% of its recorded history in conflict. You have driven hundreds of species to extinction on your own world. You have built weapons capable of destroying your entire planet dozens of times over. We also built cities, David said. Created art, developed medicine, explored our solar system. We're not perfect, but we're trying to be better. Trying is insufficient. A reptilian delegate from the scaled Concordat leaned forward. Every species in this council went through growing pains, but none with such violence, such waste, such disregard for life itself. You asked to join galactic civilization, while you still build weapons of mass destruction, while your nations still threaten each other with annihilation. David felt his carefully prepared arguments crumbling. We've had 70 years of relative peace. Our conflicts have decreased. We've established global cooperation on climate change, disease prevention, space exploration. Doesn't our progress matter? Progress can be reversed in a moment. Kill's voice carried finality. The Galactic Council exists to protect all member species. We cannot allow a threat of your magnitude into our ranks. The risk is unacceptable. So what are you proposing? Trade restrictions? Limited contact? David already knew the answer but needed to hear them say it. Quarantine? The word came from all 12 delegates simultaneously, a practiced declaration. Earth and its solar system are hereby designated a restricted zone. All human expansion beyond your home system is forbidden. Any vessel attempting to leave will be intercepted and destroyed. This quarantine will remain in effect indefinitely, reviewed every 50 standard cycles. The floor seemed to tilt under David's feet. You're caging us, trapping humanity in our own system. We are protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species that refuses to evolve beyond violence. Kill moved closer to the edge of his platform. Perhaps in isolation, without external threats or resources, humanity will finally learn peace. Or perhaps you will destroy yourselves. Either outcome is preferable to unleashing your chaos on civilized space. Civilized? David tasted bile. You sit here in your perfect assembly hall, judging us for fighting to survive on a death world while you evolved on paradise planets. You call it civilization to lock an entire species away because you're afraid of what we might become. This is not negotiable, Dr. Reed. The whispers spoke again. The vote was unanimous. 12 species representing 400 worlds have agreed. Humanity is too dangerous. David looked around the circle one last time. He saw fear in some faces, disgust in others, and in a few, something that might have been pity. None of it would change anything. When Earth's government asks what we did to deserve this, what should I tell them? Tell them the truth. Kill's light patterns shifted to something ancient and cold. Tell them they were born violent on a violent world, and the galaxy has no obligation to give them a second chance. Tell them to look inward and find peace if such a thing is possible for humans. Tell them this is mercy, not punishment. We could have sterilized your world. We chose containment instead. How generous! David turned without being dismissed, another breach of protocol he no longer cared about. He walked back across that endless floor while 12 species watched in silence. The chamber doors sealed behind him with a sound like a prison cell closing. Outside, his shuttle waited with Earth's delegation. 50 people who had spent months preparing humanity's case, gathering evidence of progress and peace. They read the verdict on his face before he spoke. Pack everything, we're going home. David moved past them toward the pilot's cabin. And someone contact Earth Command, tell them to prepare for siege conditions. As of today, humanity is alone in the universe. The shuttle lifted away from the assembly station 3 hours later. David watched through the viewport as the massive structure shrank to a point of light, then disappeared entirely. Somewhere in that building, 12 species were celebrating their wisdom in containing a threat. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had not caged humanity. They had created something far more dangerous. They had given 7 billion people a common enemy and infinite time to prepare. David pressed his palm against the cold glass and made a silent promise to no one and everyone. This wasn't over. 5 years of silence changed everything. David stood in the observation dome of Luna Station, watching Earth turn beneath him in blues and greens and clouds. Beautiful, peaceful, dying slowly from the inside. The quarantine had done exactly what the Council intended. Without access to raw materials from asteroid mining, without trade routes to distant colonies, without the dream of expansion that had driven humanity forward for a century, Earth's spirit had begun to rot. The stock markets had crashed within months. The space industry collapsed entirely. Young people who had trained their whole lives to work in orbital construction or deep space exploration found themselves with nowhere to go, nothing to build. David had watched it happen from his apartment in Geneva for 3 years before accepting the position here. Chief diplomatic advisor to Luna Station, though there was no diplomacy left to practice. The Council had been clear. No negotiations, no appeals, no contact except for the quarterly inspections where their ships would scan Earth's orbital space to ensure compliance. Dr. Reed, a young officer approached, her uniform crisp despite the recycled air and dim lighting. Luna Station ran on emergency power now. No shipments meant no spare parts. We're receiving a transmission from the Council Enforcement Fleet. They're entering the system. How many ships? David already knew it would be different this time. He had felt it coming for weeks. 37 vessels. That's 3 times their normal inspection force. The officer's voice cracked slightly. She was maybe 25 years old. She had never known a universe where humans were welcome. David moved to the command center, a cramped room that had once coordinated traffic for hundreds of civilian ships. Now it tracked only the Council's movements and the slow decay of humanity's orbital infrastructure. Commander Raymond Park stood over the scanning console, his jaw tight. "They're not following standard approach vectors," Raymond said without preamble. "This isn't an inspection formation, this is an attack pattern. Raise them on all frequencies." David felt ice spreading through his chest. "Demand to know their intentions." The communications officer worked for 3 minutes before shaking his head. "They're not responding, sir. They're jamming all our outgoing signals." On the main screen, the Council fleet spread out across the orbital plane like a net. Their weapons systems showed active on the sensors. David had spent 20 years studying alien technology and military doctrine. He recognized what he was seeing. This was a sterilization formation. They were preparing to eliminate every piece of human infrastructure in orbit. Why? Raymond's voice carried the same question David was thinking. We've complied with every term of the quarantine. We've dismantled our military satellites. We've grounded the defense fleet. What more do they want? The answer came 5 minutes later, broadcast on emergency channels so everyone on Luna Station could hear. Ambassador Kill's voice filled every speaker. Attention, Earth government. The Galactic Council has reviewed your compliance with quarantine terms and found you inadequate. We have detected weapons-capable satellites remaining in orbit. We have identified military-grade vessels hidden in your Lagrange points. You were given a chance for peace. You have chosen defiance. That's insane. Raymond pulled up the satellite inventory. Every military asset was decommissioned 3 years ago. Everything up here now is civilian, whether monitoring, communications relays, research stations. They're seeing threats that don't exist. David understood with horrible clarity. They're not seeing threats. They're manufacturing justification. The Council is afraid we'll break quarantine eventually, so they're removing the possibility entirely. They're going to destroy everything we have in space. The defense grid is offline, Raymond said. We have maybe 20 short-range missiles left for debris clearing. Against 37 warships, we'd last about 4 minutes. Then we don't fight. David activated the station-wide channel. All personnel, this is Dr. Reed. Prepare for evacuation. We're abandoning Luna Station. Everyone to the escape pods immediately. We have maybe 15 minutes before they open fire. Alarms blared through the corridors. 12,000 people lived and worked on Luna Station. The evacuation pods could hold maybe 8,000 if they packed them beyond safety limits. David did the math automatically and hated himself for it. 4,000 people were going to die here today. I'm not leaving. Raymond pulled up the weapons console. I've got the firing codes for those missiles. If we're going down, we take a few of them with us. You'll kill more of our people than theirs. David grabbed Raymond's shoulder. The blast waves will destroy half the escape pods. Stand down, Commander, that's an order. Raymond's hands shook over the controls. Then he nodded and stepped back. Get to the pods, David. I'll make sure everyone else gets out first. David should have argued, should have pulled rank, ordered Raymond to save himself. But they both knew someone had to stay behind to override the lockouts and launch the pods manually. Someone had to die so others could live. I'm sorry, David said. Don't be, Raymond managed a tired smile. Tell Earth what happened here, make them remember. David ran through corridors filled with screaming people and flashing emergency lights. He pulled stragglers toward pods, pushed through crowds, counted faces, and knew it wasn't enough. The station shuddered as the first Council weapons fired, not at them yet but at the satellites surrounding Earth. Century-old. Weather monitoring systems exploded in brilliant flashes. Communication relays that had connected the world went dark. He found an escape pod with space for one more person. A woman pushed her daughter forward. Take her, please. David pulled the girl inside and sealed the hatch. Through the porthole, he saw the woman's face as she turned to run for another pod. Then the station heaved sideways and the artificial gravity failed. The pod launched automatically, rockets firing in sequence to push them away from Luna Station. Pressed against the tiny window, David watched as 37 Council warships opened fire simultaneously. Lance beams of coherent energy punched through Luna Station's hull like paper. Sections decompressed in violent explosions. The fusion reactor breached, creating a miniature sun that consumed the entire central hub. 12,000 people had been on that station. David counted 47 escape pods scattering across space. Maybe 5,000 survivors if he was generous with the estimates. 7,000 dead in the span of 3 minutes. Among them, Commander Raymond Park, who had stayed at his post to save as many as he could. Among them, Dr. Sarah Lynn, who had developed new hydroponics techniques that could have fed millions. Among them, David's daughter Rebecca, who commanded the station's barely functional defense system and had died trying to protect people who had nowhere left to run. The pod's autopilot guided them toward Earth's atmosphere. Around them, Council warships methodically destroyed every human presence in orbit. Docking facilities, research stations. The ancient ISS memorial that had orbited for 200 years, all of it reduced to expanding clouds of debris. David's phone vibrated with an incoming message that somehow pierced the jamming. From Ambassador Kill, just 2 words: compliance or extinction. Something broke inside David Reed that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with cold mathematics. The Council had made their position clear. Humanity could accept slow suffocation or quick extermination. They had provided no third option because they could not imagine one existing. That was their mistake. They had judged humanity dangerous and then forced them to prove it. They had killed thousands, including his daughter, and called it enforcement. They had left 7 billion people on Earth with nothing left to lose. As the pod hit, atmosphere and fire screamed past the windows. David made his decision. He would show the Council exactly how dangerous humanity could be when you backed them into a corner. He would teach them that some species, when caged and tormented, do not break. They evolve. 2 years disappeared like water through clenched fists. David resigned from every official position 3 days after Luna Station burned. The memorial service for Rebecca lasted 6 hours and felt like 6 seconds. When they handed him the folded flag and thanked him for her service, he smiled and nodded and felt absolutely nothing. The grief would come later, in the deep places where he built his revenge. The mining facility on Ceres should not have existed. The Council's quarterly scans had mapped every human installation in the solar system and ordered them abandoned. But the scans looked for active power signatures, heat emissions, electromagnetic activity. They did not look for cold installations buried under 50 meters of ice and rock, running on minimal power, staffed by people willing to live in darkness. David floated through the central chamber, magnetic boots keeping him anchored in the low gravity. 30 engineers worked at consoles that glowed faint blue, their faces illuminated by screens showing Council fleet movements, technology analyses, weapons specifications. Every person here had lost someone at Luna Station. Every one of them had volunteered for this. "Show me what we have." David stopped beside Dr. Alan Wu, a cybernetics specialist who had lost his husband and 2 sons in the massacre. Alan pulled up a 3-dimensional projection. "Project Genesis is ready for field testing. We've successfully created a self-replicating nanomachine swarm with the capability to infiltrate any silicon-based computing system. Once introduced to a network, it spreads exponentially, learning and adapting as it goes." Alan zoomed in on a single microscopic machine. Each unit can remain dormant for months, hiding in unused memory sectors, waiting for the activation signal. And when activated, David knew the answer but needed to hear it confirmed. Total system corruption within 6 hours for a standard Council warship, 12 hours for a planetary network. The swarm doesn't just disable technology, it makes it turn against itself. Power plants reverse their output. Life support systems switch to poisonous gas mixtures. Navigation systems send ships into stars or planets. It's not just destruction. It's conversion of their entire technological civilization into a weapon against itself. David studied the projection. The nanomachines looked almost beautiful, delicate structures of carbon and exotic materials they had synthesized from Ceres's mineral deposits. How do we deliver it? That's the elegant part. Michelle Santos, their infiltration expert, joined them. She had gray hair now despite being only 35. Stress and grief aged everyone down here. "We don't need to physically reach Council space. They've been monitoring Earth for 7 years. They scan our communications, our internet traffic, our power grids. Every inspection, their ships bounce sensor beams through our infrastructure." "So we let them scan us," David said slowly, "and the scan carries the swarm back to their ships." "Exactly. We've hidden the activation code in normal civilian traffic, weather reports, entertainment broadcasts, shipping manifests. The swarm is already out there, riding Council sensor beams to every ship that's ever scanned Earth. It's been spreading for 6 months, dormant, invisible, waiting in the systems of approximately 14,000 Council vessels and 843 planetary networks." David felt something cold settle in his stomach. That's the entire Council fleet and half their civilian infrastructure. Yes, Alan met his eyes without flinching. When you activate Genesis, the Council doesn't just lose their military capability. Their entire technological civilization collapses. Billions of people depend on systems that Genesis will corrupt. Power, water, climate control, medical facilities, all of it goes dark. How many casualties? David asked the question that had been haunting him since they started this project. Michelle pulled up statistical models. Conservative estimate, 3 billion dead in the first month from infrastructure collapse, another billion over the following year from secondary effects. Famine, disease, societal breakdown. We're not talking about a military strike, David. We're talking about sending 12 species back to the Stone Age overnight. They killed 7,000 of our people. Someone spoke from across the chamber. David turned to see Commander Rachel Okonkwo, who had survived Luna Station by being on a supply run to Earth. They didn't hit military targets, they destroyed civilian infrastructure, killed scientists and engineers, murdered children. And then they sent us that message, compliance or extinction. So we comply or we go extinct? Another voice, bitter and angry. Those are our only choices. No, David activated the chamber's main display. We choose option 3. We make them regret ever pointing their weapons at us. The room fell silent. 30 people stared at the activation interface for Project Genesis. One command, one signal, and the galaxy would change forever. I need everyone to understand what we're doing here. David's voice carried to every corner of the chamber. This isn't justice. This isn't even revenge. This is genocide on a scale that will make every human atrocity in our history look like a schoolyard fight. We will kill billions of aliens who had nothing to do with Luna Station. Farmers, teachers, children, all because their governments decided we were too dangerous to exist. And if we don't, Rachel asked, if we just accept the quarantine and hope they eventually change their minds? Then we die slowly, Alan said. Earth's resources are finite. Without asteroid mining, without fusion fuel from Jupiter's moons, without the ability to expand and explore, humanity suffocates. Maybe we last another 100 years, maybe 200, but eventually we collapse into resource wars and starvation. The Council knows this. They're counting on it. They sentence us to extinction and call it mercy. David thought about Rebecca, her last message to him the day before Luna Station died. She had been excited about a new propulsion concept that could make Mars colonies sustainable. She had been 28 years old and full of hope for humanity's future among the stars. I spent 20 years believing diplomacy could solve any problem. David touched the activation key but did not press it. I believed if we could just prove ourselves peaceful enough, civilized enough, worthy enough, the Council would accept us. Luna Station proved I was wrong. They will never see us as anything but animals that need to be caged. So we prove them right. Michelle's voice held no judgment, just the question. No, we prove that caging animals has consequences. David looked around the chamber one final time. If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. Take a shuttle back to Earth. Tell no one what you saw here. Live whatever life. The quarantine allows. I will activate Genesis alone if necessary. Nobody moved. 30 people who had lost everything stood in the darkness of Ceres and waited for his decision. David pressed the activation key. The signal went out on every frequency simultaneously, hidden in weather satellite transmissions and commercial broadcasts. Across the galaxy, 14,000 dormant swarms woke up and began their work. The nanomachines multiplied, spread, infiltrated every system connected to the first infected ship. They moved through Council networks like wildfire through dry forest. Activation confirmed, Alan said quietly. Genesis is spreading. Conservative estimate says full corruption of Council military systems within 18 hours. Civilian networks within 48. God forgive us, someone whispered. God has nothing to do with this. David shut down the activation console. This is entirely human. The Council wanted to see what we're capable of when pushed to extinction. Now they'll learn. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of minimal life support. Somewhere above them, stars shined on a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. The council would wake tomorrow to find their civilization falling apart around them. Their mighty fleets would become coffins drifting in space. Their proud cities would go dark. And they would know, finally, what it meant to judge humanity too harshly. Ambassador Kill was reviewing agricultural reports when his console died. One moment, data streamed across holographic displays showing crop yields from 47 harmonious worlds. The next, every screen went black. Emergency lighting kicked in, painting his office in harsh red. "Technical difficulties," he muttered, reaching for his personal communicator, also dead. The backup communicator, dead. His office door would not respond to commands. The environmental systems had stopped cycling air. Through the window, he watched the lights of the council headquarters winking out section by section. A building that had operated continuously for 3,000 years was going dark in minutes. Kill's assistant burst through the door, having forced it open manually. Her crystalline structure flickered with panic patterns. "Sir, it's not just here. We're getting reports from everywhere. Ships are losing power. Planetary networks are crashing. The entire communications grid is fragmenting." "How widespread?" Kill moved to the window, looking down at the capital city. Lights were dying across the entire metropolis. Vehicles drifted to stops in the streets. The transit system had frozen in place. Every council species, 12 civilizations, all experiencing simultaneous catastrophic system failures. Kill felt something he had not experienced in centuries: genuine fear. "Contact Earth. Use the emergency quantum link." "Sir, the quantum communication array is offline. All faster-than-light communications are down. We can't reach anyone outside this star system." "Then send a sublight messenger drone to the nearest council world. We need to know if this is localized or—" "We already tried. The drone's navigation system corrupted during launch. It fired its engines at full burn directly into the moon. Sir, our technology is turning against us." The reports came in over the next hour as runners brought messages on paper, an ancient medium the Harmonious had not used in millennia. The warship Endless Harmony had suffered a reactor breach and exploded, killing 6,000 crew. The medical station on Harmonious Prime had switched from dispensing medicine to pumping toxins through patient IV lines, killing hundreds before staff manually shut down the systems. Agricultural drones across 17 worlds had begun spraying poison instead of fertilizer. By the second hour, Kill understood this was not a technical malfunction. This was an attack of unprecedented sophistication. The message arrived on the third hour, broadcast on primitive radio frequencies that somehow still functioned. David Reed's face appeared on the emergency screens that still had power. Kill would never forget that expression. No anger, no triumph, just cold, terrible finality. "Ambassador Kill, members of the Galactic Council, 7 years ago you judged humanity too dangerous to join your civilization. 2 years ago you murdered 7,000 of our people and called it enforcement. You gave us a choice between compliance and extinction, so we chose option 3. The video cut to footage of Council warships drifting dead in space, their crews suffocating as life support failed. Then to a scaled Concordat city where power plants had reversed their output, causing cascading explosions. Then to a Whispers colony where the atmospheric processors had switched from generating breathable air to producing chlorine gas. "What you're experiencing is called Project Genesis," David continued. "A self-replicating nanomachine swarm that has infiltrated every computer system in Council space. Every ship, every station, every planetary network. Right now your entire technological civilization is collapsing. Your ships are falling from orbit. Your power grids are failing. Your medical systems are killing patients. All because you decided humanity was too dangerous." Kill tried to speak, to order someone to stop the broadcast, but his voice had died in his throat. "You were right about us being dangerous," David said. You just made a critical error. You thought the danger came from our violence. You thought if you caged us, we would either learn peace or destroy ourselves. You never considered the third option, that we would prove you right in the worst possible way. The broadcast showed Earth now, still under quarantine, still isolated. We didn't have ships to fight you. We didn't have weapons to match your fleets, so we used what we had. Human ingenuity, human stubbornness, and most of all, human capacity for absolute ruthlessness when you threaten our survival. You started this war, Ambassador. We're ending it. The screen went black. Kill stood alone in his darkening office, feeling his crystalline structure fracture with stress patterns. Through the window, he watched his civilization dying in real time. Emergency services could not respond because their vehicles would not function. Hospitals could not treat the injured because medical equipment had turned lethal. Fire suppression systems were spreading fire instead of extinguishing it. Reports continued arriving through the day. The scaled Concordat homeworld had lost orbital control, and 17 satellites had fallen from the sky, impacting cities. The Whispers had lost their entire deep space fleet when navigation systems sent all 300 ships directly into their star. Every species in the Council was experiencing the same systematic collapse. By the end of the first day, preliminary casualty estimates reached 1 billion across all 12 species. By the end of the second day, that number had doubled. Infrastructure collapse cascaded into secondary disasters. Dams failed without computer control systems. Chemical plants exploded when automated safety systems reversed their functions. Medical patients died by the millions when hospitals went dark. A junior aide brought Kill a handwritten message 3 days after the collapse began. Sir, we've established a makeshift communication system using old radio technology. A delegation from the neutral species is requesting to meet with you. Tell them the Council is not accepting visitors. Kill could not face other species right now. Could not explain how the mighty Galactic Council had been brought to its knees by one species they had dismissed as primitive. Sir, they're not asking. They're demanding. They say if the Council cannot restore order, they will intervene militarily to protect themselves from the chaos spreading across this sector. Kill laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. Intervene with what? Every species that uses advanced technology is experiencing the same corruption. The swarm is not targeting just Council members. It's spreading to anyone who trades with us, anyone connected to our networks. The humans have burned down the entire technological civilization of this galaxy. What do we do, Ambassador? Kill looked at his aide, a young Harmonious who had grown up in a universe of infinite possibility and instant communication. She had never known darkness, hunger, or fear. Now she would learn all three. We survive, Kill said. We bury our dead. We learn to live without the technology that defined us. And we pray to whatever gods still listen that the humans decide we've suffered enough. Will they? The aide asked. Kill thought about Luna Station, about 7,000 humans killed in minutes, about the message he had sent afterward. Compliance or extinction. He thought about David Reed's face on that broadcast, empty of emotion, delivering judgment with the finality Kill himself had used 7 years ago. I don't know, Kill admitted. I don't know if they even care what happens to us now. We're not a threat anymore. We're just billions of people dying in the dark, casualties of our own arrogance. Through the window, the capital city sprawled in shadow. No lights, no movement, just smoke rising from 1,000 fires that no one could extinguish. The Harmonious had built this city over 2,000 years, each structure a masterpiece of art and engineering. It would all be rubble within a week. Kill pressed his hand against the cold glass and wondered if David Reed was watching from Earth, witnessing the destruction of the species that had judged him. Wondered if the human felt satisfaction or horror at what he had unleashed. Wondered if Reed felt anything at all anymore, or if revenge had burned away everything human inside him, leaving only ashes. David watched 6 view screens showing 6 different dying worlds. The Harmonious homeworld burned in shades of crimson. The scaled Concordat cities crumbled as their impossible towers lost the anti-gravity systems holding them aloft. A Whisper's colony suffocated as atmospheric processors failed. 12 civilizations collapsing simultaneously, broadcast across every frequency for anyone to witness. Current casualty estimates? His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Flat, clinical, the voice of someone reading statistics instead of counting corpses. 3.7 billion confirmed dead. Alan pulled up numbers that scrolled endlessly across monitors. Another 2 billion projected in the next month from secondary effects. Starvation, disease, environmental system failures. Some species are suffering worse than others. The Whispers are nearly extinct. They evolved in artificial habitats and can't survive without technology maintaining their atmospheric needs. David absorbed this information without reaction. 4 billion dead already, more than half of Earth's entire population, gone because of his decision. And the swarm. Still spreading, still adapting. It's reached species that weren't even council members but traded with them. The corruption is exponential now. Any civilization using silicon-based computing is vulnerable. We estimate Genesis has affected 63 species across 200 star systems. Michelle entered the chamber carrying a data pad, one of the few pieces of human technology they still trusted. We're receiving communication requests from 47 different species, all demanding we stop Genesis. Some are threatening military action. With what military? David kept his eyes on the screens. A harmonious child, maybe 6 years old, wandered through dark streets searching for her parents. He watched her collapse from exposure, watched her stop moving. Their fleets are space debris, their weapons systems corroded from the inside. Not all species relied entirely on technology. Michelle set the data pad in front of him. The Broken Swords are a warrior culture that maintained traditional weapons and tactics. They're mobilizing a fleet of solar sail warships to attack Earth. Estimated arrival in 40 days. How many ships? 3,000, crews of 500 each. 1.5 million soldiers armed with melee weapons and chemical explosives. Pre-electronic technology that Genesis can't corrupt. David considered this. 1,500,000 aliens with swords and spears coming to Earth. It would have been laughable before Luna Station. Now it just felt inevitable. They'll die in Earth's orbital defenses before they land a single soldier. We don't have orbital defenses anymore, Rachel reminded him. The Council destroyed everything in the quarantine enforcement. Earth is unprotected. Then we build new defenses. David turned away from the screens. How long to manufacture conventional weapons, guns, missiles, nothing electronic that Genesis could infect? We'd need to restart production facilities that have been closed for 200 years, Alan said. Learn techniques our great-grandparents used. We're talking about months of work. Then start now. If the Broken Swords want war, we'll give them something even more ancient than their traditions. Human desperation. The communication request came on the third day after David made his broadcast. Not from the Council, but from a coalition of 17 neutral species who called themselves the Free Assembly. Species that had watched the quarantine with discomfort but had done nothing to stop it. Now they wanted to talk. David accepted. Their delegation appeared on the view screen, a dozen different alien forms speaking through translators. Their appointed representative was an elderly creature called Director Myra, her species similar to Earth's mantis insects but 3 meters tall. Her voice carried authority and barely concealed terror. Dr. Reed, on behalf of the Free Assembly, we ask you to deactivate Project Genesis immediately. Why should I? David kept his tone neutral. The galaxy watched the Council cage humanity and said nothing. You watched them murder 7,000 of our people and did nothing. Now you want mercy. What you've done goes far beyond retaliation. Myra gestured to screens behind her showing the same devastation David had been watching. 4 billion dead and climbing. Species that never voted for the quarantine are dying. Children who had nothing to do with Luna Station are suffocating in the ruins of their cities. This is not justice. This is genocide. You're right, David felt something crack. Inside his chest, the first real emotion he had experienced in weeks. This is genocide, just like slowly suffocating humanity in a quarantine until we collapse was genocide, just like destroying our orbital infrastructure and killing thousands was genocide. The only difference is scale. So you justify killing billions because the council killed thousands. Another delegate spoke up, a gaseous being similar to the whispers. By that logic, any atrocity can be justified by pointing to a lesser atrocity first. David closed his eyes and saw Rebecca's face, saw Commander Park's tired smile, saw 12,000 people dying in vacuum because they dared to defend their home. I don't need to justify anything. The Council passed judgment on humanity, called us too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They were right. They just thought judgment would end with us accepting their cage. They were wrong. Then what do you want? Myra leaned forward. What will it take for you to stop Genesis? We will give you anything within our power. David opened his eyes. This was the moment. The choice between revenge and something else. Something he could barely remember wanting. I want recognition of humanity's sovereignty. I want every species in this galaxy to acknowledge Earth's right to exist, to expand, to explore without restriction. I want the quarantine ended permanently. Done, Myra said immediately. The Free Assembly recognizes Earth's sovereignty and calls for immediate cessation of all quarantine measures. I'm not finished. David pulled up a document his team had prepared. I want the Council species to accept responsibility for Luna Station, full reparations for families of the dead, public acknowledgement that the massacre was unjustified, and I want the formation of a new galactic order where no species can be caged for being deemed dangerous by others. The Council can barely govern themselves right now, a delegate objected. Their civilizations are in collapse. How can they agree to anything? That's not my problem. David felt the coldness settling back over him. They had 7 years to negotiate. They chose violence instead. Now they accept my terms or Genesis continues until there's nothing left of their civilizations but ruins and memories. The delegates conferred in hushed voices. Myra finally spoke. We will carry your terms to what remains of the Council government, but Dr. Reed, you must understand something. Even if they agree, even if every species accepts your demands, billions have already died. The galaxy will remember what humanity did here. You've proven the Council right about your danger. No, David leaned forward. I've proven that treating someone as dangerous creates the very monster you fear. The Council could have accepted humanity as equals. They could have worked with us, guided us, helped us grow beyond our violent history. Instead, they caged us and then tried to exterminate us when we rattled the bars. They created this outcome. I'm just the weapon they forged. You had a choice, another delegate said. You could have responded with restraint. You could have targeted only military installations. You could have negotiated. Instead, you chose genocide. I chose survival. David cut the feed before they could respond, before they could see the tears finally breaking through his careful control, before they could witness him breaking down in the darkness of Ceres, surrounded by monitors showing the results of his choices. Alan put a hand on his shoulder. We can still stop it. Genesis has a deactivation code. We could broadcast it right now and the swarm would cease functioning within hours. And then what? David wiped his eyes roughly. The Council rebuilds, they remember what we did, they come back stronger and more determined to eliminate us. We'd have killed billions for nothing. Or we could stop now and try to build something better, Rachel said quietly. Show the galaxy that humans know when to stop, that we're capable of mercy even in victory. David looked at the screens one more time. A harmonious city where survivors had organized rescue efforts using nothing but their own bodies and determination. A scaled concordat world where different species worked together to restore basic services. The galaxy was learning to survive without the technology that had defined them. Maybe there was something worth saving after all. 3 months after Genesis went silent, David stood on Earth's surface for the first time in 8 years. The transport had landed at what used to be Geneva, where the old United Nations building still stood despite the quarantine's economic collapse. Fresh air hit his lungs like a punch. Real gravity pulled at bones that had grown accustomed to series. The Free Assembly had arranged this meeting on neutral ground. Earth itself no longer quarantined but not yet truly free. Ships from 40 species orbited overhead, monitoring the gathering, making sure no one started another war. Ambassador Kill waited in a conference room that had been retrofitted with minimal technology. Paper documents instead of holographic displays. Mechanical lights instead of smart systems. Everything analog, everything safe from the corruption that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Kill looked nothing like the proud being who had sentenced humanity 7 years ago. His crystalline structure had fractured in places, stress damage that would never fully heal. He stood with difficulty, age, and trauma weighing on a body that should have been nearly immortal. Dr. Reed, Kill's voice carried through an old-fashioned speaker instead of a universal translator. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Did I have a choice? David took a seat across the table. Between them, folders containing the terms of Earth's liberation, recognition of sovereignty, reparations for Luna Station, the establishment of the Free Species Compact, a new galactic order built on the ashes of the old. You always had a choice. Kill settled into his chair with visible pain. That's what I've come to understand. At every moment of this tragedy, both of us had choices. I chose to judge your species based on fear. You chose to prove my fears correct. You killed my daughter. David's voice stayed level through pure force of will. You murdered 7,000 people who had done nothing but exist in your way. Don't talk to me about choices when you made yours first. You're right. Kill pushed a document across the table. The Council takes full responsibility for Luna Station. We acted out of fear and called it enforcement. We executed civilians and called it necessary. We started a war and convinced ourselves it was peacekeeping. Every word in this document admits our guilt. David read through the carefully worded apology. It said everything he had demanded and meant nothing at all. Words on paper could not resurrect the dead. How many of your people are still alive? 7 billion out of 12. The casualty rates varied by species. The Whispers were nearly extinct before your coalition stopped Genesis. The Harmonious lost half our population. Some species fared better, but none escaped undamaged. Kill looked out the window toward the clear sky. We've been reduced to pre-industrial civilization on most worlds. It will take generations to rebuild, if we ever do. You asked for this. The words came out harsher than David intended. You could have left us alone, could have watched from a distance if you thought we were dangerous. Instead, you caged us and then tried to kill us when we didn't accept it quietly enough. Yes, Kill turned back to him. We created this outcome through our own fear and arrogance. But Dr. Reed, answer me honestly. Did billions of civilians deserve to die for our mistake? Did children who had never heard of humanity deserve to suffocate in the dark? Did farmers on distant worlds deserve to starve because their leaders were afraid of Earth? David had asked himself that question every day for 3 months, had watched the casualty reports climb, had seen footage of species driven to extinction not by direct violence but by the slow collapse of everything they depended on. 7 billion dead, more than had lived on Earth just a few centuries ago, gone because he had activated Genesis. No, David said finally. They didn't deserve it, but neither did Rebecca. Neither did the 7,000 at Luna Station. Neither did humanity, sentenced to slow death in a cage. This galaxy operates on violence and fear. I just proved humans can be better at it than anyone else. Is that really what you proved? Kill picked up another document. I've been reading human history, your philosophers, your moral teachers, your leaders who chose peace over violence. Gandhi, King, Mandela, people who faced oppression worse than quarantine and responded with nonviolence. What would they say about Genesis? They're not here. David felt anger rising. They didn't watch their daughters die in vacuum. They didn't carry the weight of 7 billion people with no future. Don't quote human philosophy at me when your species tried to commit genocide through starvation. You're right again. Kill set down the paper. I have no moral authority to lecture you. I just wonder if perhaps both our species learned the wrong lessons. We learned that humans are exactly as dangerous as we feared. You learned that violence works better than diplomacy. The galaxy is more broken now than it was before Luna Station. Then maybe it needed to break. David stood, unable to sit still anymore. Maybe a civilization that sentences entire species to death for being inconvenient deserves to collapse. Maybe building something better requires burning down what came before. And what have we built? Kill gestured at the documents between them. A treaty signed by species too terrified of humanity to refuse anything you demand. A new order established through genocide. You wanted recognition, Dr. Reed. You have it. Every species in this galaxy now recognizes humanity as the most dangerous thing in known space. Is that the legacy you wanted? David walked to the window. Outside, human ships were landing. Engineers, diplomats, scientists ready to help rebuild the galaxy they had broken, or perhaps ready to ensure humanity's dominance in the new order. He was not sure anymore which was true. I wanted my daughter back, David said quietly. I wanted Luna Station to never happen. I wanted a universe where humanity wasn't caged like animals. I didn't get any of those things, so I settled for making sure it never happens again. By becoming the monster we accused you of being. Kill joined him at the window. The Free Species Compact is a good document. It prevents any species from being quarantined without cause. It establishes protections and rights. But it exists because everyone is afraid of what humanity might do if they refuse. That's not justice. That's tyranny with better marketing. Maybe tyranny is all we get. David turned to face the alien who had sentenced his species to death. Maybe in a galaxy that resolves disputes with violence, the most violent species wins. You taught us that lesson. We learned it well. Then we've both failed. Kill's structure flickered with patterns of deep sorrow. I failed my species by starting a war we could not win. You failed yours by proving every terrible thing we suspected about humanity. 7 billion dead, 12 civilizations in ruins, and for what? So Earth can have the freedom we should have granted peacefully 7 years ago. David had no answer. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the weight of choices that could never be unmade. Finally, he spoke. The Free Assembly wants me to lead the reconstruction effort, coordinate aid to damaged worlds, help rebuild what Genesis destroyed. Will you accept? I don't know. David looked at his reflection in the window, seeing a stranger. The man who had believed in diplomacy had died at Luna Station. The man who remained was something else, something colder, part of. Me wants to help, wants to prove humans can build as well as destroy. Another part thinks the galaxy deserves to live with the consequences of what they created. And what did they create? Kill asked. A monster who proved them right about human danger, a weapon that will never be forgotten. A reminder that some species, when pushed to extinction, will take the galaxy down with them. David picked up the treaty documents. I'll sign these. Earth will join the galactic community, will help rebuild what we destroyed. But I want one thing added to the treaty. What? A memorial on every council world that suffered casualties, listing the names of everyone who died, human and alien, all of them. So no one ever forgets what violence and fear create when allowed to run unchecked. Kill considered this. The Council will agree, though I suspect our species will remember for different reasons. We'll remember the victims, you'll remember the lesson. Maybe, David walked toward the door. Or maybe we'll both remember that judgment without mercy creates monsters, and monsters once created cannot be easily destroyed. He left Kill standing in the conference room surrounded by documents that would reshape the galaxy. Outside, human ships continued landing, bringing aid to worlds that had nearly died from his revenge. David watched them and wondered if redemption was possible for someone who had killed billions. Rebecca's memorial stood in Geneva's old quarter, a simple stone with her name and 12,000 others. David visited it before returning to Ceres. He knelt in front of her marker, feeling nothing and everything simultaneously. I avenged you, he whispered. Killed more aliens than humans ever had before. Brought the galaxy to its knees, made them remember Luna Station, made them afraid. The stone offered no absolution. Was it worth it? He traced her name carved in granite. 7 billion dead for 7,000. Does that math balance? Does justice scale like that? The wind answered with silence. David stayed until dark, then stood and walked back to his transport. Earth wanted him to lead the reconstruction. The galaxy wanted him to help rebuild. And David Reed, the man who had turned civilization to ashes, would have to decide if monsters could learn mercy. Or if some fires, once started, burned forever.